Make this your new best decision ever. I'll read through the topics we're about to cover, and then we'll get into the details. So first, we'll talk about what the best decisions that you've ever made have in common, why they stand out. We'll talk about satisfaction with results, surpassing expectations, and social reinforcement. We'll talk, the middle section will be about how to organize your life around how to make high-quality decisions. We'll talk about regretting disappointing results without condemning the method. We'll talk about learning from the mistakes of other people, like from my mistakes, and I might share a little bit more about some specifics. The next heading is to maximize learning, expect to notice lots of small mistakes. The last main section is organizing your life around how to produce the results you value most. And we'll include a few paragraphs on the problem with habitual perfectionism as a response to social pressure, how you can get high-quality constructive criticism and why you would want to, and cultivating a culture that promotes high-quality results. By culture, I mean individual interactions, relationships, and a social context. So, a community, you might say. So that's what we'll cover, and this does lead to other content from what's here. So let's back up to the very first question of, when you think of some of the best decisions that you've ever made, do they have anything in common? Why do those decisions stand out as the best? One factor can be that the actual results were much better than the expected results. Maybe you produced results that were much better than what you expected. Maybe you produced results that were exactly what you expected, but much better than what certain other people expected. Maybe the decision was something that other people doubted would work out and were reluctant to try, but you trusted yourself and you did it anyway, and you were pleased by your results and proud of your courage. Another part of what can really make a decision stand out in our memory is the social context of that decision. One example of a social context is when there was an option that I was hesitant to take, but lots of people around me encouraged me and expressed their confidence in me. Sometimes that can go very well, and sometimes very poorly. But when it goes well, I can get a very favorable result and have a lot of emotional satisfaction about that result. I'm sharing it with other people. There's excitement. Whatever their response is, it gets, emotions happen. Maybe other people are jealous. Well, that's still an emotional marker, like that it really marks the thing as a significant decision, because you've got that social reinforcement of the decision, even if there's kind of a negative response or repulsive response that some people have. The fact that there's a big social response makes it a memorable decision. So I can feel a distinct pride and fulfillment about what I have done and how I have done it. I can also feel the support and the pride of the people who've encouraged me, whether that's just one person or many people. Most likely, the decisions that you can look back on as the best decisions you've ever made include a variety of social contexts. Some choices you made simply by instinct and without regard for any social validation or criticism. Other experiments you did primarily as a direct result of social encouragement or even social pressure. If there was a lot of socializing about your choice and your results, then that can certainly strengthen your memory of the decision. So, we mentioned satisfaction with results. not much yet. We've mentioned surpassing expectations and social reinforcement. Let's talk more about satisfaction with results. I do not think that the biggest issue as far as what makes the best decisions, what makes something get on my list of my best decisions, I don't think that the biggest issue is an unusual social context or better results than expected. Those help, but the simplest detail that connects my own best decisions ever is my own satisfaction with the results. Yeah, I was effective at producing results that I eventually recognized as very valuable. Maybe that recognition was instant. Maybe I, expected it, and maybe I got it and instantly knew I got it and instantly was satisfied. And maybe it took years of hindsight for me to fully appreciate the long-term significance of my choice in that particular case. For you, in some cases, maybe you simply declined to do something that other people encouraged you to do or pressured you to do. Maybe you were conservative and cautious, and then later you saw their results and looked back at your own caution as extremely valuable and even courageous. Maybe you were skeptical where other people were presumptive and naive. Or maybe you did something boldly and did it very effectively even without any social encouragement, or even with intense social discouragement. But if something is on your list of best decisions ever, then that probably means that you were unusually happy with the outcome of the decision, right? The main issue is the result is something that was satisfying to you. So now let's address a big topic of organizing your life around how to make high-quality decisions. What if you organize your life around making new best decisions ever, making them regularly, daily? What if you significantly increase the value that you get from your future decisions, and even from your past decisions? Because you can still learn from old decisions. You might not have learned everything you could possibly learn from all the decisions you've already made. So some of these ideas, as far as making the new best decisions ever regularly and organizing your life around making high-quality decisions, well, some of these ideas may seem curious or strange. However, if these words were just repeating things that you were already thinking, that would not be very distinctive, would it? At least we're going to take some ideas that might have been on your mind and we're going to organize them in a way that could be really valuable to you. So have you ever heard someone say, "I regret that I made that decision"? What they generally mean is that they regret the results that were produced, and they have learned from those results, probably learned not to do that method. In other words, the decision itself produced learning. It was effective as a decision in producing learning. It wasn't effective in terms of producing results that would be repeatedly produced, would be valued and repeatedly produced. The decision produced learning. So the decision wasn't a bad decision per se. The decision might not have produced much else besides a hard lesson, but sometimes hard lessons might be a great way to learn, right? So consider that when someone says, "I regret that decision," what might be in operation in the background is a perpetuating of guilt or even shame. I regret that decision. That produces what? Or that corresponds to what? It corresponds to guilt. Maybe shame, but certainly guilt. What if I simply recognize that I value some results more than others, and some methods more than others? From that perspective, every choice results in learning, no matter what. So, every choice contributes to my future intelligence. There's no bad choices. There's just choices that I would recommend, choices that I repeat, and choices that I learn from. and do not repeat and do not recommend. So my interest now is not to condemn certain decisions as violations of perfectionism. And I haven't talked about perfectionism yet, but we'll come back to it a bit. So if there's this idea of perfectionism, and then that means never making any, never having disappointing results, because that means experiencing disappointment, and never making mistakes, because that means experiencing humility and learning. Oh, learning, horrible. Well, that's the orientation of perfectionism. And if I'm not perpetuating perfectionism for some reason, and we'll address why I might do that, but if I'm not perpetuating perfectionism, then I'm not going to bother condemning choices, condemning specific decisions. I don't condemn the decisions. I notice the value of the different decisions, the different amounts of value that I associate with different decisions, different options. If I relax any anxiety about being loyal to some particular ideal of perfectionism, relax. If I relax any anxiety about being loyal to some particular ideal of perfectionism, then I can focus on what actual results I produce and how to measure them, and what methods produce the best results. I can relate to all decisions as informative, educational. Some of them, yes, I would repeat and recommend. All of them, no. The idea of perfectionism, that every choice I would make, I'm going to be an expert already and I'm going to never have to learn, that's silly. Or we could say that's paranoid or anxious, that's agonizing. So I can stop relating to my past decisions as nothing more than methods to avoid criticism or compete for approval. My decisions are there to get me results. I want to make new decisions to get new results, to learn new things. And if there's a context where I'm competing for approval or avoiding criticism, well, that's going to create some weird inefficiencies in the realm of perfectionism. So how did I recover from perfectionism? Let's talk about regretting disappointing results without condemning the method. I can even, be grateful for the method, for the experience, for the choice, the results. And I can regret that the results were disappointing, but I'm grateful that I produced them. Have I ever made any bad decisions? For a while, I would have denied that and said, no, those were all good decisions. And I might have been insulted at anything approaching an accusation that I had made a bad decision. I was very sensitive, as like, I'm just a superior person. It's not that I'm a perfectionist, I'm just better than everyone else. So have I ever made any bad decisions? Well, let's talk about how I related to that phrase, bad decisions. For a while, I rejected the idea of bad decisions from insecurity, you could say from shame, from anxiety. Later, I would have listed several specific decisions as bad. And why would I have listed them as bad? That's based on what happened later, like the experiences produced by the decision, my experience, or the experience for other people that were produced by that decision. Like, I made a decision and it had a consequence for myself and for others. So I could say, well, that was a bad decision based on the consequence of it. Now, I've withdrawn all condemnation of my own decisions or the decisions of anyone else. I don't have to condemn decisions. I don't have to call them bad. Some are better than others in the sense of the results that they produce. But the decisions are always informative. They're always instructive. If I pay attention to the results they produce, then I get value out of every decision. So withdrawing condemnation of my own decisions or any particular decision somebody else made, wow, what a massive relief that is. instead of investing in resentment and guilt and all those kind of things, I just withdraw my condemnation of decisions. I can focus on the results without condemning them. I can even admit in some cases, well, here's a result that didn't seem great at the time. Maybe I complained about it, but in a way I liked it because I kept doing it. So I don't have to have a pretense about, I keep making bad decisions and blah, 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 blah. No, I keep making decisions that I like, and some of them I call bad because socially I find value in calling them bad and then displaying that label to other people. That label of, oh yeah, that was bad. Those were all bad decisions. Well, okay, what's the value socially of saying that? Is there any? Am I avoiding somebody's criticism that I'm expecting? Am I competing to, get approval for saying, yeah, those decisions were bad? The point is, different decisions produce different results. Condemning the past maybe it was valuable on occasion to condemn the past. Maybe I'll do it again in the future, but I'm not counting on it. I'm not planning for it. I'm planning for making high quality decisions, not planning for having more material to condemn. People who are looking for lots of material to condemn, that is an interesting practice, and I will not talk about that right now any further, but that is an interesting practice for people to look around, for people to condemn, ideas to condemn, statements to condemn, actions to condemn. Okay, that's going to be exhausting, isn't it? So why is it a relief to withdraw condemnation? Condemnation is certainly a valid option. However, condemnation can take a lot of energy and attention away from measuring results and tracking which methods produce which results and making new experiments and calmly brainstorming on new alternatives and talking to people about what's working for them. Condemnation is about slowing down my learning process. It's a response to social pressure or expected social pressure. When I'm condemning a bunch of stuff, it's out of showing loyalty to some ideal of perfectionism, and ideals of perfectionism form when there is social pressure to make people obedient to certain very specific kinds of behaviors and forbid people or punish people from even considering certain other behaviors. So we condemn the things that have been forbidden by society. But I don't need to keep investing in that. I don't need to energize that. Maybe I do it occasionally, but I don't need to make it into a practice or a habit. My habit can be making lots of decisions carefully and watching for the results, noticing the results, and seeing which decisions I like best. And if I get social value from going around and condemning certain things or lots of things, okay. But condemnation for its, for the sake of condemnation, I tend to be skeptical of the lasting value, so to speak, alleged value of condemnation. So, we talked about learning from mistakes a little bit. You can learn from the mistakes of other people like mine. And really the issue of condemnation is a great kind of transition point for this topic. Condemnation is a great method for socially displaying my loyalty to a particular form of perfectionism. In other words, I'm anxious about other people's opinions of me. So in response to my social anxiety, I condemn stuff to display loyalty and attract approval and avoid criticism and condemnation. I condemn to avoid getting condemned. Did you hear that? That was kind of ironic. I condemn most hysterically and passionately when I'm most terrified of being targeted with condemnation. So sometimes I can directly condemn a particular method to influence someone and prevent them from learning something the hard way. Maybe there is a context of social pressure. I recognize that somebody's in the midst of social pressure, so I condemn a particular method directly to them. I'm telling them, don't do that. I'm discouraging them. Avoid that thing. Do not do that thing that is going to get you a bunch of negative social consequences. Avoid getting negative social consequences by avoid doing things that I expect from my, maybe because I'm older or have more experience with a particular social context, I can say to somebody, you're probably going to want to be cautious about that, or for sure avoid that. Maybe I interrupt other people and offer to help them to learn from someone else's mistakes. Those could be my own mistakes. I could have a story of lots of people whose mistakes I witnessed and have mistakes that I have learned from. So I can share stories about methods and results and guide people. I can even threaten punishments to, certain people. For instance, if I have a business and I have employees, I can say, if you do a certain thing, whether you understand why it's unfavorable or not isn't my first concern. My first concern is that you avoid certain things that I know are best to avoid. So maybe I interrupt people, and if they're about to do something or if they're talking about something favorably, maybe I interrupt them and offer to help them learn from someone else's mistakes, including my own mistakes. Maybe they resist learning from anything but their own mistakes. Although, if I care about their results, then I can continue to influence their methods. I can share stories about cause and effect. I can threaten punishments. I can impose punishments. I can take actions to influence their choices and their results. Now, I have made many mistakes. Even in trying to influence other people, sometimes it doesn't work great. Sometimes it takes a lot of energy, and I could say, well, that was a mistake. It worked somewhat well, but I could do better. I could be more efficient, more effective, more efficient works. So I've made many mistakes. However, I now assert that I've never made a bad decision. In fact, I'm not even claiming that there's really any meaningful. I'm not claiming that. I'm questioning the idea that the label bad decision is even very useful or meaningful. I've just made enough decisions that some produce better results than others. Making mistakes is part of learning. I want to make choices, measure the results of those choices, or recognize the results of those choices, and learn. And then repeat things that work well. I want to study other people's methods and results. I want to see what methods did not work well for them, what methods did work well for them. I want to make observations that allow for me to make, good choices. The key to making good choices, is making precise observations of cause and effect. I didn't even write that in my notes, but that's very good. The key to making good decisions is making careful and precise observations of cause and effect, of methods and results. My methods and my results, or other people's methods and other people's results. In fact, I'd like to notice lots of mistakes and lots of innovations that other people made. If I really want to be efficient, I want to learn from other people's activities, at least a balanced amount. I want a fair amount of learning from other people's activities, ideally. And, obviously, I need to do some fine-tuning on my own. But if I can learn as far as the big guidelines from other people's mistakes and other people's successes, then inside, those big guidelines, I'll fine-tune based on my own small mistakes. That's really my orientation. That's what I'm offering and suggesting, recommending to you. Learn the big guidelines from other people's mistakes and successes, and then we, even you and I, directly in conversation with each other, can fine-tune some of the details. We'll work out the little details after we get the basic structure of good decisions and, results that you value. What are your priorities? So, I'm making reference to lots of topics that we can come back to later. The basics here is to maximize learning, expect to notice lots of small mistakes. Measure or observe results and expect that some of the results will be disappointing. Some results will be more satisfying than others. Expect to notice lots of small mistakes, or expect to notice lots of things that we will later improve on. A mistake is just something that I later improve on. It's something that helps me learn. So to maximize learning, expect to notice lots of small mistakes. Avoiding mistakes is refusing to learn. Also, avoiding mistakes can lead to massive mistakes. I guess we can think of two ways to avoid mistakes. One thing is to avoid taking action. But generally, we're going to take some action. It might just be we're going to take the same old habitual action. Consider that it's not that I can actually avoid making mistakes. I can't avoid taking action and having consequences of those actions. But I can avoid recognizing particular actions as mistakes. I can avoid that for seconds. I can avoid that for years. I can resist the idea that I could do better than what I've done before. If I recognize, okay, that result isn't as good as I would like, then I can call that a mistake. It's a very casual, relaxed way of labeling things as mistakes. So I can have lots of small mistakes. What is that any problem? For a perfectionist, it's intensely stressful to admit that something is a mistake, because they're competing for social validation, so they pretend to be confident. But in general, labeling something a mistake is really just if that is useful, great. Okay, that was a mistake. Have you ever cooked something and maybe you put in a little bit too much of a certain thing, or you didn't put in enough of a certain thing? You're like, oh yeah, I guess that was a little mistake. I should add a little bit more. Then you correct it. It's making a mistake is in many cases insignificant, other than the fact that once you identify it as a mistake, you have now gotten closer to a satisfying result. Awesome. Mistakes are awesome. I frequently take actions that I later consider a mistake. Lots of small mistakes are much more favorable than a few massive ones. Especially massive ones that I take a very long time to admit. So, why not be very willing to throw the label mistake on something? See, how could that have been a mistake? How could I do it better? How can it contribute to my learning and my future results? Accept mistakes. Plan to make lots of them. Notice them as quickly as possible and as precisely as possible. It's useful to include a reference here to precision, because as we're measuring and observing and reconsidering our past actions, we want to be precise. We don't want to be rehearsing our presumptions and expectations and defending our choices. We want to we want to have introspection that allows for us to honestly assess cause and effect, and then we want to engage, or I want to engage in interactions where other people are direct and clear and committed to showing me causes and effects. When I did something well, they want me to notice that it went well and notice what method caused that success. When I do something poorly, they want me to notice that quickly and recognize how a certain method produced an unsatisfying result, or was a mistake? So for me, I'm kind of giving this instruction to myself: accept mistakes. Another instruction: avoid pretending that it's really possible to completely avoid mistakes. We can avoid admitting mistakes, but we can't avoid making mistakes. We can kind of like really, really, really slow down any new experiments so our actions are all habitual and familiar. And you could say that's avoiding mistakes, but I could say, no, that's a mistake. So maybe there are occasions where We want to simplify and stabilize and, minimize experimentation. Fine. Eventually, make some experiments and make some new mistakes. Yeah, awesome. So we can avoid admitting mistakes. We can deny mistakes socially. We can even attempt to distract ourselves from the results we produce. We can attempt to distract other people. It might be favorable occasionally to distract ourselves from what results we produce. But why would why would somebody keep distracting themselves from the results they produce? Well, because they want to avoid noticing them. It's kind of simple. Now, why would they want to avoid noticing them? Well, I mentioned perfectionism a few times before. Now we're going to get a little deeper into it. Now, instead of being anxious about mistakes, just be interested in results and effectiveness. How can you organize your life around making lots of new best decisions ever? It's going to involve a change in how we relate to perfectionism. We'll get to that very shortly. How can you organize your life around making lots of new best decisions ever? Make some new decisions and be very attentive to the results that they produce. So if we kind of stabilize everything and keep things consistent, there is a value in that, because then if we change just one thing, then we've kind of isolated that change. So if we change one practice or one behavior and that produces significant new results, we know that's probably the source of the new results, because we've only changed one thing. So that's, getting to the point of making it easy to recognize new results. So make some new decisions and be very attentive to the results that they produce. Then, once the results of the first decisions are clear, make some other new decisions. In other words, kind of isolate your incremental changes. Organize your life around how to produce the results you value most. This seems like such a simple thing to say, but we may want to say a little bit more about it so that we actually are doing this idea. This is an unusual idea, I think. Organize your life around how to produce the results you value most. This isn't what most people are programmed to be obedient. They're conditioned, they're, advertised, they're marketed, things are marketed to them or advertised to them, they're indoctrinated. That's in modern times, it's pretty normal. Other people organize our lives around the results that are valuable to them. How about this radical approach, not condemning any of that other stuff, but just organizing my life around how to produce the results I value most? For you, it would be organizing your life around how to produce the results you value most. That also would mean, by the way, noticing what results you value most. I didn't actually detail that in this presentation here, but one of the really obvious things is physical signs of pride and satisfaction, joy, delight, euphoria. These emotions are physiological responses. They have brain chemistry like dopamine and endorphins and different hormones like that. Organize your life around how to produce the results you value most. That means produce a few different results. Look at other people's lives, other people in your life, fictional characters, whatever, and that doesn't matter. You can look at the results or consider the results that other people get. You can consider, are those results appealing to me? That's really the point here, is just get related to what results do I value most? What have I valued most in the past? In other words, actions that I kept taking that kept producing the same results. Obviously, I valued them, or I wouldn't have kept doing them. And then in the future, and ongoingly, what results do I value most? This isn't like the results that I value most are one set of things. They can change over time. When I'm 3 years old, when I'm 30 years old, when I'm 13 years old, I value different results at different times. So, now, if you're not in the midst of lots of indoctrination and programming and conditioning and advertising and marketing and all that, or maybe you reduce your exposure to some of that or a lot of that, now we have kind of a possible clean slate. We may want to untangle ourselves from some of those past presumptions. But now we can organize life around how to produce the most valued results. Most valued by who? For me, most valued by me. I need to be related to my own experience in order to recognize what I value most. It's not what people have told me I should value most. Or that's not the only factor. The real thing is, what do I actually look back on with satisfaction, with pride? What do I experience spontaneous pride about? Not when I really, really think about it, or only when I really, really think about it, but just like, when I first think about it, I'm grateful, I'm proud. So, I made a few, impromptu, ad-lib comments there about this transition toward organizing life around producing valued results. Again, first point is, we might not already be doing this. If you think you're already doing this, then you probably wouldn't be listening to what I have to say about it. You might organize your life more around producing results you value. You might organize your life around noticing what results you value. What repulses you? What attracts you? If it would give you a massive increase in satisfaction, would you be willing to reduce or discontinue some of your familiar habits? This is a pretty loaded question. I'll ask it again. If it would give you a massive increase in satisfaction, would you be willing to reduce or discontinue some of your familiar habits? If there were methods that you could use to get much better results faster and with less effort or risk, would you be open to that? Or would you be so anxious about avoiding criticism for mistakes that you compulsively avoid learning any new methods at the risk of producing new results? Why exactly did I ever try to avoid mistakes? To avoid making them, to avoid admitting them? As noted, the first layer is that I simply tried to avoid being aware of the results I was producing. I tried to avoid being aware of the results I was producing. Doesn't sound like a very good approach. But in some cases, that's the adaptation that people make to social pressure. So I tried to avoid recognizing which actions were mistakes and which ones were effective. I tried to remain, you could say, confused or ignorant about cause and effect, action and consequence. Maybe I distracted myself and perhaps distracted a few others by being very easily offended at certain whatever, and condemning lots of people and ridiculing lots of behaviors. That's all off-target stuff. If I can't, interrupt some conversation and disengage from it, withdraw from it, and I go on and on and on, ridiculing, harassing, that's generating conflict. That's not something I value. I generally prefer to avoid controversy, frankly. I don't like being offended, but some people seem to seek it out. They look for things that offend them. And then they, throw around how offended they are. And maybe that's, some kind of emotional expression that is valuable to them. Maybe they've had some kind of emotional inhibition and they want to go around and find some stuff to condemn and, create some conflicts and explore their repressed rage. Well, they might do that far away from me, or in a context where they do it so quickly and it so quickly resolves and relaxes into humor and relief that there's not this ongoing being offended and resentment and contempt and those kinds of lasting upsets and distress. So the background issue there, when I was attempting to avoid admitting mistakes, was that I was competing for social validation. In other words, I was socially unstable and seeking stability from others, through other people supporting me. This isn't unusual for children, for young, small humans. Competing for social validation is often what happens because in many cases they aren't that well supported. might be neglected or ignored. Their parents might not really know how to be really good parents. The other people that are there to care for them might not be very interested in them or very good at nurturing those children. So the background issue was I was competing for social validation. I was competing for attention, for nourishment, for encouragement, for guidance, for wisdom. I wanted other people to actually discipline me in the sense of show me cause and effect, show me action and consequence, help train me to produce high quality results, to produce results that I value, and to even influence my values in a way that really works for me, rather than, with big institutions and stuff, media, they influence people's values in a way that conforms with the interests of the institution. So the background issue was that I was competing for social validation. That's why I didn't want to admit mistakes or recognize them even. If I don't look at cause and effect of my own, consequences that I'm producing, then I can more sincerely claim perfectionism. So I threw around invalidating comments regularly at other people, even comments to invalidate myself, but maybe I'll come back to that. I invalidated myself in ways that were still a social pretense, a social complication. I even made occasional dramatic apologies, maybe while crying, about a few very isolated mistakes or a certain pattern of activity. That one I apologize about. And I made occasional dramatic apologies about a few very isolated mistakes that I was unable to perpetually deny. So, yeah, I admit that. And I'm such a great person because I admit it, and I apologize, and here's a new promise, and you might hear it again in a month. You might make it again in a month if you're, on the other side of that experience. People make the same apologies over and over and over sometimes. That's weird, isn't it? It's notable. You make one apology once, maybe twice, but if you're making the same apology 6 times, 40 times, 705 times, that's a few times. That's an interesting thing. So I avoided quickly identifying my mistakes as mistakes because I was terrified of being targeted with social condemnation. So it's not just that, many people are neglected. Many people are harassed and, pushed, bullied. Many people are targeted, even with physical abuse. So I avoided quickly identifying my mistakes as mistakes and admitting them because I was terrified of being targeted with social condemnation. Now, other people might be, have been more terrified. They might have been targeted with more social condemnation than me, or less, or whatever. Of course, there's going to be variations. That's not really an important detail here to me. The important thing is that everybody has some aspect of this in their history, probably. Almost anyone listening to this probably has some experience of anxiety about social condemnation. If I was anxious about social condemnation, then I want to avoid social condemnation. Why? Or how? How do I avoid social condemnation? By not noticing bad consequences that I produce. By not admitting bad consequences that I produce. Because I don't want to be targeted with condemnation. I'm not saying this is a very good plan or that it works very well, but it's the kind of thing that a lot of people do. I was not a perfectionist because of something fundamental about me. I was a perfectionist, but not because of something fundamental about me. I adopted the habit or practice of perfectionism as a coping mechanism for social pressure that I experienced as overwhelming. Maybe I complained that I should have been better protected, or that those people should not have bullied me, or those people should not have betrayed me, or they should have trained me better, or whatever my complaints were. Complaints, again, are instruments for organizing other people's social responses to me. Complaints, condemnations, they have their place. They are not required in when I'm organizing my life around producing high quality results and making high quality decisions. Complaints and condemnation don't need to be a big part of that process. Criticism might be. We'll come back to that soon. Constructive criticism. Anyway, so when I was in more of a perfectionist mode, I was quite interested in complaining and blaming and condemning and so on, vilifying certain people. Lately, I've lost interest in those complaints. My own complaints that I used to have, as well as other people who were making similar complaints around me. For the most part, I'm not that interested in most people's complaints. I don't know if this is shocking, but I'm not that interested in most people's complaints. Some people, I would be interested in their complaints in general. In some cases, I might be interested in specific complaints in particular. But usually, the average person complaining doesn't really, interest me. I don't go, oh, I agree with their complaints. Yay. Or if I do, it's just not as important as it had been for me. I don't argue with them to say, oh, you should stop complaining and you should stop condemning stuff and you should stop being so negative. And here's why. Why do I care what everyone does? I just don't. What a relief. I care about the people that I care about. I care most about the people that I care about most, and then there's a lot of other people besides those that I care about most. In fact, I don't know if you're aware of this, there's something like 7 billion people on this planet. I don't know most of them, and I probably never will. Lately, I've lost interest in some of my old familiar complaints. How did I lose interest? Well, I simply withdrew from certain sources of social pressure. I withdrew from certain people and certain interactions or patterns of interaction that were stressful, uncomfortable, or anxiety-producing. I withdrew from those people. I withdrew from those social contexts. I withdrew from interactions, from conversations. It's a one-by-one thing or a case-by-case thing. I withdrew from certain people, I withdrew from certain conversations, and then if the same person keeps bringing a conversation that I find produces distress or discomfort for me, and the other person isn't doing it in a way that I see as beneficial to me, like a constructive criticism way, well then I'm going to withdraw from that person soon. Did I have lots of sincere justifications for why I withdrew? Yeah. Did I have lots of complex explanations for why I withdrew? Yeah, but none of that matters much to me now. If in fact, I don't even care. Did I have lots of sincere justifications? Maybe. Probably. Whatever. Let's move on. Move on to what? This topic. The problem with habitual perfectionism as a response to social pressure. Yeah, it works sometimes. It's understandable why people, including me, would develop habitual perfectionism. But there's a problem with it, in case you didn't know. So if the only reason that I've avoided admitting mistakes and learning from them is because of stress about avoiding social criticism for those mistakes, that's good news for me. I could just admit them and then learn from them. I will abruptly withdraw from the most vicious social critics and bullies. I will abruptly withdraw from them so that I can recognize mistakes and learn from them. I don't want to have social anxiety as my normal experience. I don't want to have distress or discomfort and concern for, avoiding. I don't want to have concern for avoiding criticism. I just want to withdraw from vicious critics. If there's people that I identify as being viciously critical, withdraw from them. Or disengage with them if they're in my midst. Just don't interact with them. That's the same as withdrawal. I don't mean just physically withdraw from them. Any kind of withdrawal. Even distract them would be an adaptation if it's impossible to withdraw from them. So I'm willing to completely release any old habits of appeasing vicious social critics, people that identify as vicious social critics. I'm willing to, offer humor and offer relaxation and comfort and diversions and, respect. I'm willing to offer respect, but I'm also willing to completely release any old habits of appeasing them and thinking that I need, that it's my fault that they're such a vicious critic. I don't need to be guilty about the fact that there are some vicious critics in, some people are more viciously critical than others. So my habits of appeasing other people or being a people pleaser, those habits help me to survive, which is great. That's kind of important. Now, I would rather avoid the most hysterical critics, which also means being sensitive about identifying people who are hysterical, vicious critics. So if I meet someone new, how can I be perceptive as to how vicious or hysterical they are in their criticisms? So now I'd rather avoid those people and those kinds of interactions, and also silence those who are easily silenced. So another alternative is to, if I can't withdraw physically, then silence them, separate them from me, isolate myself from them in terms of conversation, in terms of social interaction. Maybe physically they're my neighbors, or they're in my same company that I work for, in the same room, but I can withdraw from them. I might be able to silence them. I might be able to discourage them or punish them in such a way that they still are a vicious social critic, but they do it quietly and further away from me and without actually distracting me. So I can put some energy into them in some cases. It's not that I would never do that. But ideally, I wouldn't be around them. So withdrawal or distance or repulsion, I'm suggesting, is a much better or a more ideal response to high-intensity social pressure than habitual perfectionism and appeasement and, trying to get the approval of bullies and vicious critics. They're not really very generous in their approval. So how can you get high-quality constructive criticism? So we've talked about vicious criticism, hysterical criticism. The most radical new practice, perhaps, is to seek out constructive criticism, to set up interactions where, even from people who might be a little, passionate or emotional, where I can actually get constructive value out of whatever criticism or feedback they have. So I have to, I might have to kind of guide the interaction, ask very simple questions, or ask very rigid, structured questions. But I can seek out constructive criticism. I can get good at attracting criticism that I value, that benefits me. So I want to learn, even from my own past mistakes, especially from my own past mistakes. However, I am absolutely firm that I value certain kinds of criticism more than others. I demand high-quality criticism. I seek it out. How do I know, though, which criticism is best? What does high-quality criticism mean? How do I know? I assess criticism by its results. Not just how I feel in the process, though that's certainly a factor. I assess criticism by its long-term benefit to me. I've got to be attentive to cause and effect, to consequences, to chronology. And I've got to have time to process and notice and make connections. There has to be enough relaxation and downtime for me to learn effectively. So I know which criticism is best from the results of that criticism. The immediate results in terms of my physical experience during the, interaction, and then by the results over the course of minutes, hours, weeks, years, and so on. Does an instance of receiving criticism powerfully benefit my life? That's how I know good criticism. Does a particular dynamic of criticism improve my results? Does an interaction that involves criticism improve my results? Does a particular critic or group of critics provide the most respectful, refreshing, and relevant criticism? Even relaxing criticism where I get to laugh. That can be very refreshing too. So are they respectful? Maybe they even tease a bit, but are they respectful, refreshing, and relevant in their criticism? Does their criticism benefit me? How quickly, how well? I want to have the most high-quality critics I can possibly assemble and get the benefit of their high-quality criticism. Does their criticism enrich my life? How much? And does the criticism even consistently produce relaxation and relief from stress and pressure? Does it produce clarity? Does it untangle confusion or even avoid confusion? Things that I can see other people getting confused about, I notice I'm not confused. And maybe some criticism or other interaction with somebody, it doesn't really matter if it's criticism. My interactions with other people can be high quality, and they can include high quality criticism. Do I notice that I'm attracted to certain people that gently provide precise and productive criticism? Do I appreciate it even more if they resort to less gentle methods if gentle methods aren't working? In other words, if they try gentle methods and that doesn't work, do I appreciate that they're willing to use less gentle methods, to stick with me to get a valuable message to me? Valuable by who? By me. When? Well, probably after I get the message. After I get the message, whenever I recognize it as valuable. So I'm looking back on social pressure and just open to noticing that some of it wasn't for my benefit. Some people socially pressured me in ways that were not intended to benefit me. They were intended to harm me or to just, benefit somebody else. Maybe they wanted to push me away as a potential social critic or a competitor. I can understand all that. I can respect all that. And I can really notice the distinctive value of certain people and certain interactions that have been beneficial to me by the involvement of other people offering analysis and criticism and feedback to me constructively. So the last topic, cultivating a culture that promotes high-quality results. The high-quality methods are known as high-quality methods because they produce high-quality results. Really, high-quality results is the ultimate issue here. The high-quality decisions are decisions that produce high-quality results. I value a culture, a social context that promotes high-quality decisions. That means a willingness to try new things, to precisely assess the results of the new experiments, and to quickly admit any mistakes as mistakes. High-quality decisions are decisions that produce either relevant learning or effective results, or both. High-quality decisions produce either relevant learning or effective results, or both. If I've ever isolated some particular past decision as the very best one ever, I relax that emphasis. I don't need to be preoccupied or obsessed about defending that one as better than all of my future ones. In fact, I want to ongoingly make better and better decisions, new best decisions ever. I plan to make my best decision ever within the next 24 hours. rather than avoid making a better decision than my old favorite best decision ever. See, I don't want to set up that the one in the past was the best one ever. I want to set up in my speaking, in my way of relating to my future, that my best decisions ever haven't happened yet. I plan to make my best decision ever within the next 24 hours. I don't want to wait a long time to make a new best decision ever. Why not pretty soon from now? 48 hours from now, I plan to have made a few new decisions that are the best I've ever made. I'm going to up it and up it again and up it again. One of my new best decisions ever might involve inventing a bold claim and then publicizing it. We'll focus on that subject next in a separate presentation.